The Eclipse Awards are just about a month away here, and obviously after Taiba's dominating effort last week, or I guess on Monday, in the Malibu at Santana Park, we talked about it on last week's show. If he were to win, and if he were to win impressively, he really makes a case for the 3-year-old male honors in this year's Eclipse Awards. Epicenter, Taiba, that seems to be the debate. Everywhere you go on Twitter, I think, it's like as soon as he ran, it's like, well, Taiba is, or Epicenter still did this. And it's a very interesting debate, Alterman, back and forth. I got the stats up here on the screen. So if you're watching this, you can see the stats there. Taiba this year, seven starts, 4 wins, 1 second, 1 third, 8 starts for Epicenter, 4 wins, 3 seconds. So that's the killer right there. And 0 thirds. So they've both won 4 races this year. Now Epicenter has made more money, especially with that Travers win, 2.8 million versus 1.9 million for Taiba. But both have 4 wins, and more importantly than that, Taiba, 4 of those wins, 3 of them are grade 1s. Only 1 of those 4 for Epicenter was a grade 1. So Halterman, I'll give it to you. Thoughts, Taiba, Epicenter?
Okay, I want to make one thing very clear right now. If you're a voter and you vote Taiba, I don't blame you. If you're a voter and you vote Epicenter, I don't blame you. It's your opinion. It's what matters to you. And they made it close enough to where it's not an angry situation if you're picking one over the other. Now, if Taiba wouldn't have won, say, the Malibu, then I would be very angry if people are still picking Taiba. But he did enough to make it interesting. And again, I'm not, if you're an Eclipse Award voter and you're picking Taiba, I'm not upset with you. If you're picking up Epicenter, I'm not upset with you. One thing is really bothering me, though, okay? It's this thought that Taiba won 3 grade 1, so automatically he should be the pick. That is lazy voting, in my opinion. Really, really lazy voting, in my opinion, because this graded system is definitely fine as far as, hey, here's how you stack up races, and it gives everybody a general idea of what's going on. Let's take a look at what was in those grade 1 races versus what was in some of the grade 2 races that Epicenter ultimately won, right? The Santa Anita Derby was a horrific race. Stop. If you're going to argue with that, stop. It was horrible. Messier is horrible. The rest of the horses in the race were horrible even before that race, okay? So that's number 1. You look at Pennsylvania Derby, legit grade 1 without any question, right? That was a tough race. You look at the Malibu, it wasn't the greatest. And it was also a 1-turn race. But I'll give him like half credit for that, for sure, right? Like that was a good win. He looked really impressive. Some of these grade 2 races, like the Jim Dandy, like the Louisiana Derby, like the Risen Star, they were stronger than some of the grade 1 races that Taiba won. So I hate he now has 3 grade 1s, so that he's my pick. I do not like that reasoning whatsoever. Now, what I do like about Taiba is I think he's better than Epicenter as far as talent. And I think he's kind of shown it, right? I mean, I really do. And I think that's really going to piss people off. This horse is raw as hell. Forget about the Derby. All of his other races have been fantastic. And honestly, if he just kind of knows where Cyberknife is, I think he wins the Haskell. And I think there's no debate about it whatsoever. And so that's why I say, if you're voting on Taiba, I get it. I think he is legit. Like, I think he deserves it. I think he had a campaign that deserves it. I still would lean towards Epicenter because he won the Travers, and I think that is a bigger win than anything Taiba had. And I think some of those grade 2 wins were better than the grade 1 fields that Taiba faced. And so just because they were labeled grade 2 really doesn't mean shit to me, Jared, because I look at the fields and I look at who they beat. And I think he beat better horses than those other 2 grade 1s, not the Pennsylvania Derby, but the other 2, the Taiba beat. So that's why I would still go Epicenter. He also got second in those big-time Kentucky Derby and Preakness races everybody in the world wants to win as 3-year-olds. Taiba, through no fault of his own, was 12th in the Kentucky Derby, and I say that very confidently. Taiba had every excuse in the world in the Kentucky Derby. I don't hold it against him, but Epicenter was still second in that race and came back to get second in the Jim Dandy. So it's Epicenter for me, but I have no argument if you're going to vote Taiba.
I mean, the fact that we're even having this conversation after that start with Taiba and obviously the Derby, like, I think if after the Derby you would have said he's going to be a 3-year-old candidate of the year, you'd be like, yeah, right. There's no way, because you may never see him again after that effort.
Listen, it's tough because if Taiba and Epicenter race tomorrow and say they're all healthy and rested, blah, 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 I would pick Taiba to beat Epicenter. I think he's the better horse, but I don't think he had the better campaign. And I want to be clear again, through no fault of his own, right? I was on this podcast on the Haskell and you were like, I'm going to pick Taiba. And I was like, he could win. But once again, he is put in a terrible spot by his connections. You're coming off a 12th in the Kentucky Derby, the 4th lifetime race. You're shipping him all the way across the country and to run the Haskell. He has a ton of excuses to lose that race. And you picked him, and I didn't argue with it. But at the same time, it's impossible. They put him in impossible spots. And at times, he did the impossible. He shouldn't have won the Santa Anita Derby, right? And he did it. Pennsylvania Derby that was a tough spot for him, and he did it. And then all these 2-turn races, and we cut him back to 1 term in the Malibu, and he did it. So he is super talented. I do think he is the better horse as far as talent goes. I just think Epicenter's body of work is just a bit stronger than Taiba's. And I'm just going purely on resume when it comes to who I would pick.
All right. So I think we are going to disagree a little bit here because even though I do understand your point, the bottom line is for me, 3 grade 1s to Epicenter's 1 is just, to me, there's no debate there. I get that as far as it's no one's fault, I guess, if they're labeled grade 1s or grade 2s now. And so to that point, I wanted to go through, I went through and I did some fact checking, some background checking here in the last, say, 10 to 12 years. Obviously, 2 of them were Justify and Pharaoh. Those were given. They won the Triple Crown. There was no really debate, obviously, those 2 years. But the other ones, so you go back to 2021, Essential Quality, he had 2 grade 1s. Authentic, 2020, had 3 grade 1s. Maximum Security had 3. West Coast had 2. Arrogant had 2. California Chrome actually had 4. That's the most ever, well, at least in the last 12 years. Well, maybe not if you don't count Pharaoh. 4 on that. Will Take Charge had 2. Pennsylvania Derby was only grade 2 that year, so it would have been 3.
So again, you're making my point. These grades don't really matter.
All of Another had 3. And now here, this one was an interesting one. Looking at Lucky in 2010 had 2 grade 1 wins. 2011, this was probably the most somewhat comparison I could find. Animal Kingdom had 1 grade 1 that year, and that was the Derby, right? That was the only grade 1 he won that year. In the voting, if you remember, that was extremely close with Caleb's Posse that year. Mm-hmm. Caleb's Posse had 111 votes that year to 114 from Animal Kingdom. Now, Caleb's Posse had 2 grade 1 wins. So he actually had more grade 1 wins, but they were sprinting. They were 1-turn races, or, the dirt mile, but not that classic, but you had that big win. So to your point, I wanted to make sure I included this stat because to what you're saying, that is an example of, okay, Caleb's Posse may have been the better horse from a perspective of, hey, he won a Breeders' Cup race. Hey, he won more grade 1 races. But Animal Kingdom won the big one, and he was maybe just a better horse. And if you look at Epicenter, even though he has less grade 1s than Taiba, he won the Travers, which is probably second to winning the Kentucky Derby. And so that is going to be a big factor, I think, for the voters of, yeah, he still only won 1 grade 1. It was a Travers.
The race that everybody wants to win outside of the 3 Triple Crown races. Yeah. And the other race that everybody wants to win out of 3 Triple Crown races, Taiba didn't win. And so that, again, Epicenter missed his chances. He could have won the Derby. If he won the Derby, won the Preakness, we're not talking about it. Taiba wins the Haskell, we're not talking about it. And that's why we're here, right? Again, these 3 grade 1s are crazy to me. First of all, where do you have Jack Christopher ranked?
Who?
Where do you have Jack Christopher? Is he second on your list?
As far as the top 3-year-old of the year?
Yeah, top 3-year-old horse of the year. Yeah.
No, I'd still put Epicenter second.
Well, Jack Christopher won 2 grade 1s.
Yeah, but they weren't in the quality of Epicenter's grade 1. Why? Because it's the Travers. Travers has more weight than the races that Jack Christopher won. Taiba winning 3 grade 1s, even though the Pennsylvania Derby was legit. I still think that the Cincinnati Derby has a lot more stock to it than you're giving it. And I do think that the fact that he came back and won a race that a one-turn race was impressive. So listen, you also have a recency factor that's going to come into play here. Last time we saw Epicenter, he's being banned off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unfortunate because if he would have ran that race and ran his race, it could have ended the debate then that day.
Honestly, it could have ended it either way, because if he runs and gets fourth behind Taiba, then I would probably have to lean with Taiba, right?
Yeah.
And if he gets second or third ahead of Taiba, then you'd lean Epicenter. Yeah.
And I was talking to Magic earlier today, and he's obviously, there's a leader of the Epicenter fan base. It's him, and he's like, listen, I hate to say it, but unfortunately, Taiba's probably going to win it, because the biggest fact is, like, he's still running, and Epicenter's not. And I get that's hard. That's pretty unfair, considering when he was running earlier in the year, Taiba wasn't, right?
Yeah.
But it's all about recency and that's how the voters are going to look at, not necessarily what Epicenter was doing earlier in the year, but what's he doing now? And what's Taiba doing now? And that was the fact that he just came off a dominating effort in the Malibu.
Yeah, no, and I get it. And again, I'm not arguing that Taiba. My biggest argument is this 3 grade ones versus 1 grade one is just complete shit. And I don't get why people can't see it. I'm not arguing. If your argument is, I think Taiba's the better horse, great. If your argument is, look, he came back and ran fantastic despite being in tough situations, great. If your argument is, hey, look, I think he would kick Epicenter's ass, great. If your argument is, I just look at it and say, well, 3 grade ones versus 1, and that's it, I hate that. I just hate it, because to me, the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby were both tougher than the Santa Anita Derby. And to me, the Jim Dandy and the Pennsylvania Derby was about the same. And now we're given credit for a 7 furlong grade 1 win, which I'm fine with completely. But also, you're going to hear the same people that are giving credit for that have Jack Christopher nowhere to be found, because, well, yeah, he has 2 grade 1s, but they were both in one-turn races. But wait, you just said Taiba got 3 grade 1s, and so I'm putting him on top because of that. But wait, one of them wasn't a one-turn race. Let's not forget that. So, I mean, if Jack Christopher wins the Malibu, is he now the horse of the year for 3-year-olds? No. Right? And so Taiba's resume, as good as it is for what he was put through, still is flawed in a lot of ways, in my opinion, when it comes to trying to say he's a dead fast lock over Epicenter to win this race, or to win this 3-year-old race, I should say.
Well, I mean, I think I brought up the point there with the Animal Kingdom. That's a really good example, because once he won the Derby, he did finish second in the Preakness, similar to what Epicenter did. But since then he didn't do. I mean, they ran the horse in the Breeders' Cup, but of course the horse the next year. But the horse, we didn't see a horse again after the Belmont and that year, and he still won Horse of the Year. And to your point that you're saying, Caleb's Posse kept running. Caleb's Posse was on the Derby trail, and they obviously cut him back, and then rest history. So even though he cut that gap, they still gave more to the horse that won the Derby, won the big race. One was the horse, we hadn't seen the horse win a race since May, and the horse still won, even though Caleb's Posse just won the Breeders' Cup. So there's going to be a lot of factors going into, hey, even though the last time we saw Epicenter win was back in the summer of the Travers, it was the Travers versus a one-turn race in the Malibu.
I want to get to Matt's point here, because I think people might be missing what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Jim Dandy was a fantastic, great race. I'm saying just because the Jim Dandy was a grade 2 and the Santa Anita Derby was a grade 1 does not mean the Santa Anita Derby was a better race. A, it had 6 horses in the race. B, it had Messier, and that's it. It had nobody. Let me read. It had Happy Jack, Armagnac, Win the Day, and a Forbidden Kingdom who couldn't get a mile and an eighth if he jumped in the back of a pickup truck. It had nobody in the race. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Jim Dandy was a star-studded field. I'm saying if you're looking at this and you're going, well, I got to favor Taiba because the Santa Anita Derby was a grade 1 and the Jim Dandy was a grade 2, it's crazy. It's crazy.
When you compare the two like that,
these labels of these grade 1s, these grade 2s, when you get to that level in their preps for bigger races, it's just kind of a matter of who's ready to run at that moment. You're trying to time it up to the big race. The Jim Dandy is a prep for the Travers. The San Diego Derby is a prep for the Kentucky Derby. And so it's just kind of luck who falls where in what spots. Like the Arkansas Derby was a grade 1 race, but you go to the Wood Memorial and it's a grade 2. But the Wood Memorial had Mo Donegal in the race, right? Who won the Belmont. So
yeah,
the Mo Donegal was a better horse in the Wood Memorial than anything that was in the San Diego Derby, minus Taiba, obviously. These preps, I don't know why they've got them all graded differently, but we as people and as handicappers and hopefully as voters can use our brains and click on the thing where it says who's in the race and look at the fields, right? That's what I'm saying. I'm saying don't be lazy. If the San Diego Derby is a grade 1 and the Louisiana Derby is a grade 2, click on the fields and look who was actually in the race.
Yeah, Mark says, and I wouldn't disagree. The most impressive 3-year-old performance was probably in the Travers that day. I said no. I agree with Aaron. I think Taiba is just more talented, better.
That's great. That's great.
I think so.
No argument.
It's certainly the closest one that I can remember, at least in recent years. And it's unfortunate that the 2 times we got to see them, one time Taiba, obviously was that the Derby was the Derby, and they rushed him into the race, and then the next one, Epicenter got hurt. So we just really never got to see those 2 match up. That could have eliminated any kind of discussion here.
Another good comment. The Florida Derby was a grade 1 this year. You guys tell me what was better, the Florida circuit or the Louisiana circuit, right? Again, use your brain when it comes to these graded things. It's not an exact science. And I'm not even mouthing the graded stakes committee. You can't predict who's going to show up in these races when you grade the races before the year starts, right? Like, I get it. It's tough. Like historically, yes, the San Diego Derby is a great race. This year, it really wasn't. There's really no argument that it was past Taiba.
Yeah, and to Richard's point, he made more than 1 million. The Travers obviously is a huge race, but he also some of those races that are grade 2s were still worth a lot of money, and that's going to go into that as well. So, if you're a voter, I know John's a voter. I know he in his latest column he's voting for Taiba. I think you're going to have a lot of people doing that in terms of just kind of the recency, plus the fact of, to your point, if you want to I just think he's better. Taiba's better. And you want to give the better horse, in my opinion, the award. Maybe that's not always the case, but for me it is. And that's why I would vote Taiba.
Yeah. And I guess, John, I think he's justified, obviously, voting Taiba. I said it before. He has brought up that 3 grade 1s, and it does stick right in my side. I don't like it. I don't like that argument. And John, I respect him about more than anybody else in the world, really, but I don't like that argument. I really don't. I think, again, if you're voting Taiba number 1, I don't have a problem with it because he's done enough. But if it's just because 3 grade 1s versus 1, I hate it.
All right. Well, there sounds like I don't know if we've. So if you're voting, if you had a vote in this thing, you would vote Epicenter.
I still would vote Epicenter. And really, it's based on a lot of the principles that I was taught. Grade 1 wins, going 1 turn don't mean quite as much. And let's look at the fields. Let's look who they beat. Who did they beat? And also, again, I'll say it. Epicenter could have made this very easy. Beat Rich Strike, who won 1 race this year. Beat Rich Strike in the Kentucky Derby. There's no debate. And Haskell, or win the Haskell for Taiba, and there's no debate. They could have made it a lot easier. They didn't. I said it last week. Anytime now you leave it up to the voters' hands and it's not a logical situation, either camp, the Taiba camp or the Epicenter camp, they can't really be mad because you could have made this a slam dunk and they just weren't quite good enough to do it. Whether it's Epicenter just wasn't quite good enough to hit one of those big time wins early on in the season, or whether it's Taiba just wasn't quite good enough to overcome what they asked him to do.
I guess there's the heart in you wants you know, it's like you'd love to see Epicenter win it. The horse will never run again. Obviously, he's going to be retired. He's going to go to Stallion. And Taiba, I would say, is a morning line favorite as we stand here today to win Horse of the Year next year. And so he can still win an award. So you'd like to see Epicenter kind of go out on top, so to speak, even though the last time we saw him on the track, he was Van off. So to me, even though I am a Taiba guy, not really going to go wrong here in terms of the results, because I think both horses are very deserving of it.
I think it's interesting that we are both kind of like, whatever happens, it's okay. That doesn't seem to be the case on Twitter. It's been a hard debate, and I'm on one camp or the other camp.
I know.
I'm with you. I don't really care either way who wins. I'm not going to sit here and argue with it. Like I said, John White has said in his column he's picking Taiba. I'm not going to tell him he's done for it. I think it's very much justified to pick him. You know, if somebody made me vote Taiba over Epicenter, I wouldn't feel sick about it. I think they both are deserving, and it's just going to come down to a vote. I don't know. I think one's 7-5 and one's 8-5 as far as the morning line would go in this. I think it's going to be close. It's going to be interesting. They definitely made it tough on the voters this year. I don't really envy people for having to try to decide this mythical award.
You just had to jab that in there, didn't you? All right. January 26th. I know Halterman will be watching. Mike, you watch with him to watch the Eclipse Award, see who gets that award. Honestly, I'm in the industry, and I'm like, anytime the Eclipse Awards roll around, for half a second, I'm going to like see, kind of get an idea, like an up to date on who's winning these, and then I'm like, I can't find anything, and then all of a sudden I'm just like, forget it. I'll just get an email about it later, and that's I'm in the industry. So, anyways, we'll see who wins the 3-year-old honors. I've got Taiba. Halterman's got Epicenter, so our votes are washed. But we'll find out next month.
RacingDudes.com is your home for the best free picks for every race, every track across the country. We're ramping up for the 2023 Kentucky Derby, and we want you to join us in the fun. Subscribe to Racing Dudes YouTube channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a single video. Want to make money betting horses? Bet with the Racing Dudes.